Have you ever heard a story so wild, so unbelievable, that it sounds like it was ripped straight out of a rock and roll legend? Well, what if I told you that one of the most notorious moments in rock history happened by accident? In 1982, Ozzy Osbourne was already a household name in rock. Known as the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy had a reputation for pushing boundaries, for going places no one else dared to. But on one cold January night in Des Moines, Iowa, even Ozzy himself didn't realize just how far he would go. The concert was wild, the crowd was electric, and as usual, people were throwing things on stage: shirts, hats, bits of trash. Ozzy loved it. He thrived on the madness. But then, something strange happened. A dark object flew through the air, landing near his feet. At first glance, it looked like a toy, a rubber bat. Now, this wasn't unusual for Ozzy. People often threw crazy things at him: rubber snakes, fake severed limbs. The wild imagery matched his persona perfectly. So, in true Ozzy fashion, he decided to make a spectacle of it. With the bat in hand, he did something so outrageous, so shocking, that it would change his image forever. Ozzy lifted the bat to his mouth and bit down, hard, on its head. The crowd went wild, screaming in disbelief. Ozzy chewed for a moment before realizing something was terribly, horribly wrong. That wasn't a rubber bat. It was real, and it was alive. The realization hit Ozzy like a punch to the gut. He had just bitten the head off a living, breathing animal, right in front of thousands of people. Blood filled his mouth, and in an instant, the show stopped. The bat was no longer moving, and neither was Ozzy. Imagine the horror. For Ozzy, this wasn't just some rock and roll stunt gone too far. It was a nightmare unfolding in real time. Shocked and stunned, he spat out the remains of the bat, its head now in his hand. The audience thought it was all part of the act, but behind the scenes, Ozzy knew there was a serious problem. After the show, panic set in. Ozzy was rushed to the hospital, where doctors quickly realized the gravity of the situation. Biting into a wild animal like that, especially a bat, put him at serious risk for rabies. The doctors didn't waste time. Ozzy needed immediate rabies shots, a long and painful process involving multiple injections straight into his abdomen. Imagine the scene: a rock legend, fresh off one of the wildest performances of his career, now sitting in a hospital room, enduring the excruciating pain of rabies shots. It was surreal, even for Ozzy Osbourne, and the worst part, he had no idea whether he would be okay. As word of the incident spread, the media had a field day. Headlines blared, "Ozzy bites bat's head off on stage." Fans were divided. Some thought it was the ultimate act of rock and roll, rebellion pushing the limits of performance art to a shocking new level. Others were horrified, disgusted by the brutality of it all. But one thing was clear: Ozzy Osbourne had just cemented his reputation as one of the most unpredictable and out-of-control rock stars in history. Ozzy himself would go on to laugh about the incident in later interviews, calling it one of the craziest moments of his career. But deep down, even he knew just how dangerous that night had been. It wasn't just a rock and roll stunt. It was a reminder of how thin the line between chaos and catastrophe can be. Today, the bat-biting incident is legendary, a story that lives on in the annals of rock history. And it's not just because of how shocking it was, it's because it represents everything Ozzy stood for: unpredictability, wildness, and living on the edge. For better or worse, Ozzy never held back, and that night in Des Moines, he showed the world just how far he was willing to go. Looking back, even Ozzy admits that biting the head off a live bat wasn't his proudest moment. But in true Ozzy Osbourne fashion, he turned that night into a piece of rock mythology. and for fans around the world, it became a symbol of the chaos and energy that defined an era. So, was it a mistake? Absolutely. But in the world of rock and roll, where the lines between reality and myth are always blurred, sometimes the wildest mistakes become the most unforgettable legends.